And it's time one more time for...
The Horror Guys!
Yay! It's Horror Weekly, the weekly podcast of horror reviews, summaries, synopses, and commentary. That's us. I'm Brian.
Us. And I'm Kevin.
And what do we got this week?
It's continuing the Halloween season, so there's lots of new stuff.
It's crazy how many new horror movies there are. There's more than we've got days for.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably be doing new movies until January at this rate.
Uh-huh. Well, we took a look at the new Salem's Lot movie. This is the third rendition of the movie, I believe. And a strange one called Cuckoo, and a darkly funny one called The Radleys, and a sort of kind of funny Bigfoot horrific adventure, Feet of Death, and a very strange one called The Blue Rose. It was very surreal and noir, and so these are the things we're going to talk about. And we got some shorts.
These are not the big name movies of the month.
No.
That's next week.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all new stuff, so we're not going to spoil the heck out of them.
Yeah, they're all 2024, so we'll give you a taste, but we're not going to spoil them to death. And then, we didn't have any indie films this week, so we've got 5 short films.
Okay.
It's a lot of short films.
I like short films. Mm-hmm. They're free.
One that was maybe a little too short is Salem's Lot from 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Gary Dauberman, written by Stephen King and Gary Dauberman, stars Louis Pullman, Mackenzie Lee, Jordan Preston Carter. Hour and 53 minutes. This is not a miniseries, unlike the 2 previous versions.
The 2 previous ones were miniseries, and I heard it said from the people, involved with the making of it.
It should have been.
The original cut was, like hours long, and they cut it down. I was like, no, you shouldn't have done that. Spoiler-free speaking, this was good. It was true to the basics of the original story. It's based on a Stephen King, as you may know. And the book is really quite good. It felt rushed, though. The characters didn't get fleshed out enough, and they were leaping to conclusions very fast. It was entertaining, but it felt abridged, and we felt it would have been better longer as a miniseries.
A character shows up with 2 little dots on their neck where they've been bitten by the vampire. And then one of the main characters looks at it and says, I'll bet it was vampires. And the other ones are like, yep.
Yeah.
That's how much they rushed this thing.
They quickly jump to the conclusion that it's vampires, and they're all on board with it very quickly.
Yeah. That's probably my biggest gripe is just, come on.
And it goes from 0 to the whole town being vampires very quickly. Yeah, too quickly. Everything was just rushed. Yeah. Abbreviated, abridged. But it's well made. The cast is good. The CGI wasn't too obvious most of the time.
No, I think the casting was good and the acting was fine. It needed that extra hour.
Yeah. It could have used it.
Well, without spoiling it for those who haven't seen one of the many previous versions, if you have, there's nothing new here, really. We see shipping receipts and photos of large wooden boxes as the credits roll. The trail of death leads to a town called Jerusalem's Lot, a little town in Maine. We read about Barlow and Straker, a new antique store that is coming to town. And my first question is, where did these 2 vampire guys get all these antiques to open a store?
They've been around a long time. They've accumulated some stuff as they've gone along.
Mr. Straker gives instructions to Mr. Snow about picking up a huge, valuable crate from the docks tonight. The old Marsden house is said to be haunted, and that's where Straker wants the crate delivered. Snow and Hank unload the crate. Hank drops the end, which breaks the box open. It's full of dirt. The moment they leave, the crate opens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we cut to a guy named Ben Mears, who used to live in the area, and now he's come back for a visit. He's an author, and the sheriff warns him not to cause any trouble. We don't want your kind here, author.
Well, and it wasn't that confrontational, but, and this was, abridged, too, his whole history. And
everything's abridged
Everything is abridged here, yeah. So this was just a very short conversation with the sheriff. Very short.
He walks through the town of Salem's Lot, and it's all very quaint and retro. Ben then goes to a realtor looking for a place to rent, and Susan and Larry say that they'll find him a place. Larry mentions that Straker, some kind of European, bought the old Marsden house. She's been reading Ben's book, but doesn't recognize him. His face is on the back. I know you from somewhere. Well, when the landlady finds out he's a writer, she wants payment in advance. What do these people all got against writers? Well, we cut to the schoolyard, where Richie the bully picks on a new kid named Mark, but the new kid isn't putting up with it. Young Danny and his brother Ralph are impressed with Mark's courage.
And it turns out Mark doesn't put up with a lot in this movie.
No.
He's one tough guy.
Susan, her mother, and the librarian talk about Ben Mears and the death of his parents. Susan is not subtle about telling Ben where to meet her later. Hey, I'm going to be at the thing later.
Mm-hmm.
She does, in fact, find him at the drive-in theater.
The drive-in is important.
Yes. On the way home from Mark's house, Danny and Ralph meet Mr. Straker, who is creepy. I would have liked to have seen more of Straker. I thought he was very interesting.
Uh-huh. But like everything else in the movie, there's not enough of
He gets like 30 seconds of screen time.
It seemed that way.
It gets dark, but the boys continue walking the shortcut through the woods. Ralph silently disappears. Straker then drags Ralph home for a sacrifice to the Master.
Straker's basically Renfield.
Barlow arrives on the scene, and he eats messily. Yes, he's a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, we'll let the rest of the details go. And it's very hard not to compare this with the original miniseries, which we've got a link to in the show notes.
David Soul was the main guy in that.
Yep, which had nearly double the runtime of this one. There's also a 2004 miniseries remake, which we have not seen yet. I do remember seeing that at the time. It's got Rutger Hauer as the vampire.
Yeah,
or Straker or somebody.
I believe I saw it at the time.
Yeah. I don't remember it.
I think it was a lot less memorable from what I remember.
Yeah. Matt is awfully quick to jump to the conclusion that it must be vampires, and Ben and Susan go right along with him for far too little skepticism. I mean, somebody tells you in the real world that, they've seen a vampire, you're like, okay.
Yeah, sure. Uh-huh. Yeah.
There's simply not enough for any kind of skepticism here. It's all very rushed, very stripped-down version of the story, with a much more action-packed finale. If a plastic model of a cross and a wooden cross grow brightly in the presence of vampires, wouldn't that kind of remove all doubt in the supernatural?
It certainly would be strong evidence.
If you had a cross and took it into a room with this
and it starts to
obviously
glow.
Evil thing, and it started to glow brightly like it was electric.
Uh-huh.
Come on, you're not going to be doubting that. It's too easy.
Oh yeah, Rob Lowe was the main guy, Ben Mears, in that one from the 80s.
Okay. If the minions keep telling they're not quite victims about Barlow, that seems like a security risk for the vampire. Every time they're about to kill somebody, they're like, "My master Barlow would like to eat you," and then they escape and they know, it's Barlow.
Oh, it's Barlow.
How do you know? Everybody told us.
Because he said so.
We don't know how the sheriff knew about Barlow, but somehow or another he gets wind of it too. But anyway, it looks good, it has decent special effects, and the acting we get is fine, but it is just too short for the material. Not much to any of the characters, and it's all over too quickly.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to know what the storyline is without wasting 6 hours on a miniseries, just read our synopsis. You don't need to watch this. Anything to add?
No. Kind of chopped and jumpy, moving too fast. Yeah. I thought the original was superior.
I think all the important stuff is here, but you're missing what makes it fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, well, let's stick with vampires for a minute.
Okay.
And we'll talk about the Radleys. I had not heard of this until it just popped up on a feed of horror movies we got to watch. And
I went into this completely blind. I hadn't even seen a preview or the poster even. So, a little ways into it, and this will be mentioned, I said, they're vampires, aren't they?
Directed by Europe's Lynn, written by Talitha Stevenson, Joe Brand, and Matt Haig, stars Kelly MacDonald, Damian Lewis, and Sophia DiMartino. Hour and 55 minutes, so it's a little on the longish side, but I liked it.
I thought it was totally worth it. Yeah, it didn't seem long.
Okay, well, spoiler-free. Someone used their imagination to say, what if we made a vampire story, but made it so sunlight didn't harm them? Damian Lewis was very good in a dual role, as was the rest of the cast. It's billed as a horror comedy, and there are a few chuckles here and there, but it's much heavier on the horror and grim elements with a hefty dose of family drama. We both thought it was very good, with Kevin putting it way up there in his approval.
Yeah. I loved this one. That's my favorite of the week.
It's a story about a family of vampires living in the real world.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a little bit of humor there, but it's not a comedy.
It's mostly serious. Yeah. And there's an undercurrent of, there's a vampire society. They've got a helpline and a website. Various things.
I was immediately reminded about that secular vampire humanist, whatever it was, seeking a vegan snack or whatever. The one with the longest title of the year.
But it is a secret still. It's not a world where everybody knows that vampires exist.
Right.
They are keeping it hush-hush. But how they're managing to, I don't know. Well, we open on a dog eating a rabbit. Then we cut to the suburbs where the dog runs home. Rowan Radley introduces himself, his mother Helen, and his vegan sister Clara to us. And he admits that he's a freak. It even says so on the side of his backpack. It's Clara's 18th birthday, and she's acting weird, looking pale and sickly. And
you already at this point.
She keeps throwing up. Being sick from being a vegan.
He mentioned that she was a vegan and she's looking thin and sickly, and you had a guessed at this point.
I did, yeah. Well, plus Mom is making a smoothie that looks awfully red, suspiciously. And I was thinking, they're vampires. And she's not getting what she needs because she's going vegan, Well, family friend Lorna brings an extravagant dish for the party. Husband Peter is still inside shaving. Well, Peter and Lorna make eyes through the window, and she's very interested in him. Evan, he's the new boy in town, and Clara and her friend Tilly like him. Rowan likes him more. The four of them go up hiking in the ruins, and this is really a beautiful location, this town. It's very green and lush, and there's old ruins and a nice town, and really beautiful area. Tilly and Evan start kissing, and Rowan wanders off and sulks. All this is being watched by Jared, their nosy neighbor, and Evan's dad, who has followed them. And Evan's dad is kind of crazy.
He's
kind
weird.
Of conspiracy theorist, and Well, obnoxious Stuart likes Clara and offers to walk her home after the party through the woods. Well, she pukes on his shoes, and then he wants her to make it up to me, he says, as he starts to unbuckle his pants.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Well, she starts to run, and he starts getting all rapey. And she tries to fight him off normally. When that becomes impossible, she hurls him away with a burst of super strength, and then sprouts fangs and bites him in the neck. There is no doubt now she is a vampire. And
no longer a vegan.
Yeah. Well, Clara calls her parents, who were able to track her down in the woods by scent. That was neat, too. Because I was thinking, how are they going to find her? And they're sniffing, they can smell the blood. Yeah. Well, they all work together to haul away the body, which they stash in the back of the car. When Rowan hears about this, he has no idea what's going on, and neither did Clara. Are we adopted? Asks Rowan. And they assure the kids that, no, you're not adopted. It's time for the talk. And they don't mean sex education. It's time to reveal the whole family are vampires. And the parents, well, they're in recovery, or what's known as abstainers. So they are deliberately avoiding human blood. And they regret not telling the kids sooner. When Clara went vegan, it made her compulsion worse, so it took her over. We should stop there.
We should.
Because stuff happens.
Yeah, the fact that they're
ensues.
vampires is right there in the poster. I mean, it's not a big secret.
That's not a big spoiler. But then the double role is the uncle, the dad's brother, comes.
Played by the same actor.
They're
very different characters.
They're identical twins. Yeah. But, I thought he was great doing both roles.
Well, we see early on that really no one here is happy except for Will, the uncle, who knows and accepts exactly what he is. As the story progressed, we pretty much knew how it was going to go, just not with specifics. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of foreshadowing.
Yeah, they do.
Damian Lewis as both Peter and Will is really good here, as are, surprisingly, both the children actors.
Yeah, all the kids were.
There are not a lot of surprises here, but we thought it was really good. We both really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Vampires are always good, and, funny vampires are even better.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was interesting taking away the weakness of sunlight. And, they opened up with...
Well, I mean, really, other than needing blood, sunlight as a vampire is really the only weakness. How often do you get impaled by the heart with a piece of wood by accident?
Yeah. Not very often.
If you could come out in the daylight, there's not a lot of drawbacks to it.
And there's a mention about wanting to avoid garlic, but it doesn't seem that serious. More like an aversion than,
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, big thumbs up on this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, one we kind of went into blind. We saw the poster, so we knew Bigfoot was involved. Is Feet of Death, 2024. And that's feet with 2 E's, big feet. Ha ha ha.
Right.
Directed by James Chick, written by Ashley Chick, James Chick, and Ryan Stahl. Stars Andrew Jacob Brown, Jack Vanover, and Benjamin Watts. Hour and 46 minutes. Trailer in the show notes. All right, spoiler free.
Well, and this is another one that's got some dark humor to it, but it's pretty serious. It's pretty grim. Spoiler free, like the real Bigfoot, sightings of the creature are kind of scant in this movie, but it's got a good cast, an interesting script, and excellent cinematography in a beautiful setting. We thought it was a lot of fun in a horror movie kind of way.
In a horror movie kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is not a documentary.
No. Unlike others that I've seen where I thought were documentaries.
Kevin gets halfway through the Bigfoot documentary and wants to know when the killings are going to start.
Yeah.
Not going to happen here.
There was one we were watching that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well into it.
Well, this one actually is a horror movie. It's not a documentary.
Yeah. And this one is not touted as comedy, but I thought it had some comic elements to it. So, yeah.
Well, if you've got Bigfoot out in the woods killing people, there's going to be some jokes.
Mm-hmm. And that there's a Bigfoot enthusiast who's way over the top.
Yeah.
His fandom of Bigfoot.
Well, we open on a hiker in the woods, and she comes to a specific spot and finds a man's body torn open by a wild animal. And credits roll. Well, we cut to Chris Dixon, who runs a YouTube channel where he investigates unexplained murders. He's in the Pacific Northwest. True crime? People do that?
Yeah, they do.
He's in the Pacific Northwest, investigating one series of 10 strange murders. He shows us a map of the crimes, along with Bigfoot sightings. Could they be linked? Well, Al wakes up Jason, who's drunk again. There's been another attack. They're both in the U.S. Forest Service, and it's up to Jason to deal with it. Jason's not over having his wife mauled by a bear, so he's not too excited to check out this attack. Al is a good boss, and he's sending Jason out there as a sort of therapy. Chris interviews Evan, a local girl in a store, but she doesn't know anything. Some of the attacks were from cougars, and some of them were from black bears, is all she can say. Bigfoot is kind of our town mascot. No one in our town actually believes Bigfoot exists, and if he did, he wouldn't go around killing people. Sounds like a bad horror movie to me.
Huh. And you're in one.
But then they talk to Henry, a man in the parking lot, who does think it's Bigfoot.
And it's not a bad horror movie. She calls it a bad horror movie.
The sheriff, Ken Clark, is investigating the dead body in the woods when Jason arrives. It could be a bear attack, but the claw marks don't look quite right. Mary is the girl who found the body, and she's still there. She's a nature photographer.
Okay.
Okay, well, anyway, it turns out Chris, the true crime guy, is the guy who got killed in the beginning, and this is all about his investigation.
A little bit of a time slip
A little
there.
parallel time thing going on here.
Uh-huh.
All right, well, we'll stop there because we don't spoilers. It's very low budget, and the Bigfoot looks kind of cheesy. Still, the characters and actors are engaging and interesting. It's probably more drama than horror, I suppose. And as the investigation expands, we're drawn right in. The scenic locations help a lot, too. Wherever this was filmed was a very cool place.
Yeah, it was.
Those caves, I assume those caves are real.
I think they were, yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was very creative, had a few twists, and was overall fun. There's not a lot of creature here, but what we do get is good.
Mm-hmm. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Was it what you were expecting?
No, it wasn't. I was delighted and surprised by it.
All right.
Yeah, and I thought Andrew Jacob Brown was especially good in the lead. Yeah.
The main guy?
Yeah, the main guy.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thoroughly entertained.
Well, what time is it on the Cuckoo clock? It's time for Cuckoo.
Cuckoo.
2024.
And what a cuckoo movie this was.
Written and directed by Tillman Singer, stars Hunter Schafer, Jen Bluehart, and Marston Gzokis. Hour and 42 minutes, trailer in the show notes.
And Dan Stevens isn't even mentioned in top billing. But he's
I wonder if it's one of those, in order of appearance credits.
Yeah, probably.
He's the big name.
He's certainly the big name and one of the main characters. Yeah.
Yeah. Spoiler free.
This was very strange and well done. And it goes so long, keeping us interested and baffled. And well, the ending does mostly explain things and wrap it up, but it really goes a long time until it gets there. Dan Stevens stands out as a wacko here, and the whole cast is good. We really liked it.
Yeah, there's a lot of weirdness that doesn't make sense all throughout the entire movie.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of ties up at the end, but oh boy, well, what the heck is going on here through most of it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we open on a screaming fight between two people downstairs as a younger girl listens from upstairs. She runs off into the woods to get away from her parents. The man inside gets a very strange call about his adolescent going missing, and credits roll. Yeah, very weird phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we cut to the Bavarian Alps. Herr King welcomes Gretchen and her odd family, Beth, Alma, and Luis. Most of them don't speak German, and Alma doesn't speak at all, which is inconvenient.
She's the little girl.
The neighbor, Dr. Bonomo, introduces herself. Koenig is all touchy and creepy, and he offers to let Gretchen work at his new resort. We wonder what's up with that, because he is a touchy, creepy kind of guy.
He's an odd fellow, yeah.
Her father is against the idea, but Gretchen wants to make money to fly home, so she accepts. At her new job, Gretchen is not particularly interested in doing anything, and her coworker is weird. Gretchen watches as Alma has some kind of seizure that gets odd. Beatrix, the coworker, leaves Gretchen in charge and goes on a date. An odd woman named Ed comes in to rent a room and flirts with Gretchen. As they talk, an even stranger woman in a robe comes in and pukes all over the floor. Koenig calls and tells her to lock all the doors right now. For some reason, he does not want her to ride home on the bike, but she does anyway. Well, Koenig shows up at the resort and starts playing a flute.
Oh, what? Why?
Meanwhile,
well, we find out.
Meanwhile, someone is chasing Gretchen on foot and keeping up pretty well. Yeah, she's on her bicycle driving at high speed, and you can see this crazy old woman running behind her.
Chasing and keeping up, yeah.
The strange woman chases her until she goes into an emergency room to hide. The police think she's been pranked. Her family is already there because Alma had another seizure. Dr. Bonomo is there, and she says she'll get to the bottom of it. It might be due to Gretchen moving in with them. A disruptive influence.
Yeah, okay.
Well, a police detective comes to see Gretchen at work the next morning. Ed stops in to check out of her room, and they soon end up checking out each other. Gretchen then clears out the register, and the two go on a road trip to Paris. For the second time, we get a strange time slip where things repeat themselves. Well, the car crashes. The crazy woman from the night before yanks Ed out of the car and throws her far away.
So this weird woman is super strong and super fast.
And has something to do with weird time slips.
Yeah.
Before she can reach Gretchen, we hear gunshots. Gretchen then wakes up in the hospital. Koenig is there, and he warns her to stay home and mentions her being stuck in a loop. Gretchen wants her father to stay in the room and watch out for the woman, but he clearly favors Alma.
Well, and he's very ticked off about her taking off, stealing the money.
Stealing the car,
trying
yeah.
to run away. You know, he's pretty done with her. You know?
Yeah, no one's particularly sympathetic to her because she did those things.
Yeah.
And we'll stop there because it just gets more convoluted as it goes. And it does get convoluted.
Yep, the detective keeps coming back, and then other stuff happens. And, yeah, eventually it's all explained, mostly.
Yeah, the real question is Dan Stevens, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Because
Yes.
he keeps warning her not to go near this crazy old woman who is clearly dangerous. And he knows more than he's saying, but he's weird.
Is that good
He's
or bad?
creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Stevens is always great, and he's at his peak freak here. The story is crazy, and we had no idea what was going on until well into it. It's not one of those ones that's surreal or disjointed, out of order and weird crap. It's just completely unpredictable and offbeat, which we both kind of liked.
The title does give a hint. Once things start going along, if you know what a cuckoo bird is. And
Cuckoos
what
have been
they-
mentioned,
what
or
they-
mentioned several times.
What cuckoo
yes.
birds do.
Well, we mostly learn what's actually going on about a half an hour before the end, and by that time we're pretty hooked. It's crazy weird. I liked it.
Yeah, so did I. Thought it was a great script. Took a long time, but it was worth it. Yeah, I was entertained. Yeah, like Brian said, it's crazy weird.
All right, speaking of crazy weird, we've got The Blue Rose from 2024. And this one is directed and written by George Barron, stars Olivia Scott Welch, George Barron, Danielle Bazzuti, and Ray Wise.
The Blue Rose.
Now, wait a minute. We
sounds
go back
pretty.
to the Twin Peaks. There was mention of a Blue Rose, and Ray Wise was in that too.
Coincidence?
Is there a link?
There could be.
I bet there's an influence.
I bet there's multiple influences and things you can see in this movie.
Yeah, this is...
And I would say David Lynch influenced this kid. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, way up there.
Yeah.
Well, every step of this was hyper retro, strange, brightly colored and noir at the same time.
Yeah.
And very
strangely.
dreamlike. There's a story there that gets a little muddled in its weirdness, especially in the final act. George Barron, only in his late teens, he's a teenager, which I did not know as we watched this, carries the load as the writer, director, and lead actor, which is pretty impressive. We thought it was visually cool and at least interesting throughout. It's a moderate thumbs up for us.
Yeah, I didn't love it, but I don't regret seeing it. I was entertained. Thought it was interesting. Yeah. Visually, very interesting.
I was not that impressed when it was over, but now that I've heard that he was a teenager when he made this, that's super impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's low-key on the horror. It does seem more like a noir detective kind of thing.
It's a Twin Peaks kind of thing. If you
With
consider
those
Twin Peaks horror, which a lot of it was.
Undertones of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, after some very non-horrific credits.
It's very jumpy, bouncy, and, like 50s
Happy.
musical kind of stuff.
Yeah. We open on a woman on stage putting dirt in a flower pot. She waters the pot with blood, and a blue rose grows instantly. Well, we cut to a woman in the 50s baking pies for all her neighbors and her husband. And as a sort of dance without dialogue, we learn that her relationship is unhappy. And then the husband beats her up, so she cuts him up like a pie.
That escalated quickly.
Yeah. Well, Sophie then goes to a party and brings pie. Detectives Lily and Dalton are assigned to solve a homicide. Sophie's husband has been murdered, cut up like a pie. That happened in the opening scene. Sophie is missing, presumably kidnapped. At the murder house, they find blue roses growing in the front yard. But he looks closer. No, they're actually white roses with paint on them, which is weird. Well, Sophie's sister Norma is very rich and very famous, so they go to visit her. Norma offers them tea and cookies, and servant Keo brings them. Norma tells the story of how Sophie killed and dismembered her pet cockatiel and what she did to the piano teacher. But we don't hear that story. On the way out, Keo slips Dalton a note that says, "Help me." Well, Mr. Valens, the chief of detectives, chews out the two detectives for not rescuing Keo. Dalton complains that they aren't allowed to carry guns, and they have a pink convertible instead of a proper police car. Valens is Dalton's father, and they clearly don't get along.
Don't call me Dad.
Yeah. Call me boss. Yeah. Well, we cut to a lounge singer singing to an audience where everyone wears masks. It's a very strange nightclub. The detectives show up and talk about Catherine, the singer. Lily is enthralled with Catherine until her eyes bleed, but Dalton just wants to question her. This soon leads to a car chase. But Catherine drops a diamond out the window, which punctures Lily's tire.
A big diamond.
Suddenly, they are approached by a bed rolling down the street. And a strange, bald woman with glowing eyes floats out of the bed, and the two detectives drive away to escape.
All right, I think we got our taste of weirdness here.
Yeah, it's surreal and weird, and yeah, just one weird thing after another. But there's kind of a thread of a story there, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mentally alternated throughout the entire film between this is neat and this is dreck. It's a very uneven film. I said in the very first scene that it looked like the director was trying to do David Lynch, but I did not realize how right I was. It's so Twin Peaksy that they even hired Ray Wise for a part. There are some very obvious references here to Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and even a mention of Eraserhead. It's beyond homage and well into copycat territory, at least visually. But it's all right. I like Lynch, so all right.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's a very visual, very good-looking film with lots of colors and things to see. It's very obviously not a low-budget film, or at least it doesn't give the impression of being low-budget. And it's full of unusual, weird characters. Maybe a little bit too weird to be realistic.
Sometimes.
It's
yeah.
fun. From the first scene with the two detectives, I was already complaining about their acting and weird line delivery.
But that was deliberate.
Before long, it became clear that everyone was acting that stiffly, so it must have been a directorial choice for weirdness' sake.
Absolutely.
The whole thing is sort of a send-up or parody of detective movies. It's written, directed, and stars George Barron. He has some good ideas, but he really kind of needed someone to rein him in maybe a little bit. Or maybe a lot.
Or maybe not. Yeah.
It started out okay, but there's just maybe too much weirdness and dream stuff in the middle. A lot of people say that about Lynch, too, though.
Yeah. I've said that about Lynch
Yeah,
once and some of his
yeah.
stuff. I hate Eraserhead. And that people consider that a classic and a piece of art. And I think,
You hate Eraserhead, huh?
I really do. Yeah. I like Twin Peaks. I like David Lynch's other stuff.
You can't explain the woman in the radiator?
No, I can't.
Well, most of the story here makes no real sense at all, and the actual plot sort of vanishes halfway in. But the best part of the film was when it finally ended. That sounded harsh.
It does sound harsh when you put it that way.
I love David Lynch films, but I think this was maybe a little bit too much of it for too long.
And it's weird right up until the ending, too. The very ending, like that last scene, it's like, what? WTF? What are we seeing? Yeah. Almost too strange at some points, but overall I enjoyed it. The visuals make up for the story's a little thin here and there, but yeah, I liked it.
If you like David Lynch movies, this is kind of an interesting. You should probably watch it. It's a copycat, inspired by homage kind of thing.
It'll be interesting seeing what George Barron comes up with in the future.
Yeah. Well, it's time for some short films.
Okay.
Let's start out with The Mirror from 2024. Stars, oh boy, these names.
Oh, I'll let you pronounce that name.
Hamrid Reza Wahiden and Ramin Abdallah. 3 minutes, 27 seconds. Watch it in the show notes.
Short but effective. I liked this one.
A man finds a locked cabinet, but when he opens it, he finds a filthy old antique mirror inside. He cleans it up, and it doesn't look so bad anymore. When he looks into the mirror, he notices a black smudge on the glass. He also sees that he's cut himself on the forehead. In the mirror, that's where that black smudge was. He looked in the mirror, and there was a black smudge over his forehead. He patches himself up, but then he sees more marks on the mirror, and suddenly he's got wounds on his hands. How far will this go?
Now, you'd think he would have simply put the mirror back in the storage place or something, but, perhaps he was enchanted with it, yeah. But that would have been too easy. It's a story about a cursed object. We don't know why, but we don't really need to know. It's just interesting to see how the mirror does its thing.
Yeah, for 3 minutes, why not? It's good.
Check it out. It was well done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Norma is up next. Directed by John Dracul. If I had a name like that, I'd be calling myself Dracula.
Count Dracul.
Written by Maurice Winsell. Stars Brittany Myra Smith and Maurice Winsell. All a little under 5 minutes. Tony wakes up tied to a bed. A woman says she thought she'd accidentally killed him when she knocked him out. He doesn't know who she is, until she speaks.
And he recognizes the voice.
We then get a flashback to her being a telemarketer and him not being interested. He got rude and hung up on her on the phone.
Excessively rude.
Now, tied to the bed, Norma makes Tony learn that he just wasn't raised right. But maybe she can fix that.
Well, that got serious quickly. Did that make you want to talk to telemarketers when they call?
No, I'll take my chances.
Okay. It's short, but it's clear what's going on. It looks good. The acting is fine. More or less kind of a believable situation.
Be nice to those telemarketers.
It's a nice one, yeah.
What's next?
Next is Hush, Shh, Hush.
Hush, 2024.
2024. Written and directed by C.J. Scott. Stars Justice Ketterin, Addison Roden, and Zach Van Gelder. Runtime is, this is a long one, almost 13 minutes, but worth it.
Yeah.
If you like libraries, like books.
What happens?
Well, Al gives Amanda some extra hours at the library, restocking books in the basement. Call me first if anything happens. We wouldn't want to get the cops involved.
Well, that was odd.
Yeah, and Al is pretty flirty, but Amanda doesn't bite. Well, she soon gets to work, shelving and sorting books. And suddenly she meets Nicole, a strange purple-haired goth woman who seems very protective of her workspace. Didn't know anybody else was working there. Well, after a book falls off a shelf on its own, twice, could there be a ghost in the library basement? Well, Nicole is kind of mean at first, but after a bit, the two become friends. And then what happens?
It was filmed entirely at the Amarillo Library, which is interesting. If you want to make a film, you deal with what you've got.
Yeah.
It's very bright and clear, which is a nice change to a lot of other horror films. Even at one point, the lights go out, but they find a creative way for us to see what's going on. The ending was not really a big surprise, but this one could have used some more explanation. Why is Nicole there? What is she protecting Amanda from? And why? Don't know.
It left me wanting more.
Yeah.
But it was good.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, Death and the Lady, When the Grim Reaper Knocks, from 2023. That's a long title.
This was just cute.
Directed by Jeff Bailey and Lucy York Struver. Written by Lucy York Struver and Jeff Bailey. And it's animated. Sort of stop motion. 8 minutes, 11 seconds. And you can watch this on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes. What happens?
Yeah, it almost looks like claymation almost, but it looks like they're made of cloth, too. The dog and the characters it's like clothmation. It's an interesting animation style.
Well, you know, cloth has that putty look to it. I mean, there's no reason they couldn't have like clay underneath these knitted things.
Or was it even computer?
I think it's all. I think it's actually all computerized with
and
textures,
not physical.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's neat. Yeah. Well, an old woman sits and knits as her cats and dogs sit by the fire. She puts on a record, gets back to work. Jackson, the old dog, starts howling. At the music? No, there's a knock at the door. Well, the old woman opens the door, and outside is Death, dripping wet from the rain outside. She invites him in and offers him tea. The dog barks at the scary visitor, but the old woman is very friendly. The dog seems to know what's going on, but the woman is oblivious. So how's this going to end?
I think my favorite part was when the dog grabs the cat and offers the cat to death instead.
Yeah.
Take this.
Yeah.
The animation here is excellent. The dog knows what's up, and the cats don't care.
Cats are just being cats.
Still, sometimes not everything is as it seems. Sometimes it's worse. I did not see that coming.
No, I didn't either. Yeah. It was good.
Definitely my favorite short of the week.
And we have one more.
Gummy! Written and directed by Sasha Aubort. Stars Tegan Braithwaite, Dirk Hunter, and Lola Bond. 13 minutes. It's a little longer on the short side. A woman watches a movie and plays with her teeth while she watches. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we cut to the dental school, where Prudence is a student. Her father calls in the middle of practicing, and he's bossy and manipulative. My dad's a bit weird, she explains to her friend. It's very awkward when the friend comes over for dinner as she's sitting in Dad's chair. He's weird.
Mm-hmm.
They insist that she wears a bib for her soup, and there's a great deal of slurping. Prudence is obsessed with her teeth, and her father is even weirder, which soon becomes apparent. After her friend storms out, Prudence pulls out one of her own teeth, and things get worse from there.
Things get really worse. If you got to think about teeth, this is one to watch.
Well, that was fun.
Insanity, abuse, body horror, family drama. What more could you want for 13 minutes? It's sharp, looks good. It's very, very weird. And we think it's about abuse, but there seems like there's more going on there than that. It's certainly going to be the weirdest short of the week.
Yeah, it's a strange one.
Yeah, it is. But I agree with you. The death of the lady was the winner of the shorts.
Yeah, and the long films, what do you think, the Radleys?
I'm going with the Radleys as my favorite of the week, yeah.
Cuckoo was pretty good, but I like the Radleys better.
Uh-huh, yeah, all around, yeah.
All right, well, tune in next week where we'll have 5 more movies and some shorts. And I think next week we're going to have some of the big blockbusters of the Halloween season.
Mm-hmm.
It's maybe a couple of big screen sequels going on there.
All right.
And maybe a remake or two.
Maybe.
And, of course, go over to horrormonthly.com, pick up our monthly magazine in print or ebook, where it's got 37 reviews from last month in it.
37?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Or horrorweekly.com, where you can sign up and get all our reviews in your email once a week. Plus, there's a bonus newsletter that's going to be coming out next week sometime, which is going to have a couple of ground-shaking movies in it.
Okay.
Get yourself shaken up.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying, a little hint there.
All right.
All right, and we'll talk to you next week. I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
See ya.
See ya.